Let's start this one off with the Venn diagram. Is that the two circles? On one circle, you've got D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, and all the thing with like the magic and the mystery and the dungeons and the fighting and the battle and all the things there. And then on the other circle, you've got 80s rock bands, like with all the hair and the drama and the drugs, like everything like that. In their intersection, in that small sliver in the middle, just imagine what that is. You don't have to imagine anymore because we've got this book. This is another debut novel, which is just frustrating me because I'm an aspiring author to some degree, and I have never completed a book, but I've written 3, never finished them, and they're nothing like this. They're nothing like this. It's another debut. It's another Orbit published book, which I don't know if I'm late to the game, but I'm just coming into contact with Orbit as a publisher. I read The Rage of Dragons a couple of months back, and it completely rocked my pants. And now this is another debut novel from another Orbit author. This one is by Nicholas Eames. And now he's already got 2 books in the series. I'm late to the game on this one, but it is delicious. Not only is it delicious, but it's also absolutely ludicrous. Insane, ridiculous. Listen to the plot, all right? Clay Cooper and his band, Saga, were once the greatest mercenary band the world had ever known, right? They were incredible. Everybody revered them, but that was once. Now we're 20 years in the future. And so all of these guys are living their own lives. They're old, they're fat, they're drunk, or there's some combination of the 3. Until one day, one of Clay's bandmates, Clay is our protagonist, one of Clay Cooper's bandmates shows up at his door and says, I need your help. His daughter had gone missing, and so the only solution to rescue the daughter and to make things right is to get the band back together again. So that's like the 80s rock band kind of like mentality thing that's there. Now, on the other hand, we've got D&D. Dungeons and Dragons. This is the very best of Dungeons and Dragons because you probably read fantasy books before that are like Dungeons and Dragons, but it's like too much like Dungeons and Dragons, so it's like a little bit boring if you're not there playing it. This is all of the best that D&D has to offer. So you have a whole collection of monsters, first and foremost. You've got kobolds and ettins and gorgons and a bugbear, which is just a wonderful kind of like tagline on this thing. You've got the bugbear. And then, like D&D, you've got a squad of players, these teammates that all kind of represent not only like various bandmates, which by the way, like Clay Cooper, our main character, which I absolutely love. This is kind of an excursion on the 80s side of things. He's the bass player. Now it doesn't say that, and they don't play instruments, but he's kind of like the rhythm, the steady driving force of the band, which is wonderful because he's not the lead instrument, but he's the main character, or at least the POV. He's not the leader of the band, but he is the POV. I love that first and foremost because that's unique. But then secondly, I play the bass guitar. So that's a thing. Now, you've got the other bandmates that represent the other instruments as well. Only one of them has drums in his name, and he'd be the drummer. Matrix Skull Drummer, I think, is his title or name, and he's kind of like the percussion. But again, none of them are holding instruments. That's kind of all their representations. Now back to D&D, we've got a squad of players that each represent like a different fantasy D&D trope. So one of them is a wizard, one of them is like a barbarian, one of them is a fighter, one of them is a rogue. So they all kind of fill those spots in all of the perfect, like stereotypical ways. Once again, man, if you have ever played Dungeons and Dragons or been interested in it to any degree, this is going to scratch an itch that you probably didn't even know that you had. The story shines brightest in really 2 places. One is its characters and the other is its action sequences. Well, we'll do the second one first, just because it's easier. But action sequences, there are a lot of them, and it's constant. It's really, this whole book is like action sequence, a little bit of plot development, action sequence, a little bit of plot development, but it's fun. And every single one of them are unique and engaging and intriguing. Eames provides countless bone-crushing fight scenes, and each of them are interesting to read. On top of that, just the characters themselves and how they wield their weapons and use their weapons are are extremely cool. I said that it's D&D-esque, but like our main character, he doesn't really even wield a weapon as much as he wields this shield, and then he picks up whatever weapons he can use. But another one of the characters kind of has this like magical legendary sword given to him by like one of the last of another kind of race, and there's a lot of history, and that's some of the plot as well there. Another has like just, is it twin axes? No, it's twin daggers. That's the rogue, and then another has this like black axe. All of them. Oh, and then the wizard doesn't really have a weapon until he uses like a staff at some point, but he pulls out of his bag various like magical trinkets and stuff that he ends up casting, and sometimes they go awry and wrong, very stereotypical, and sometimes they go really, really right. Every single action sequence, not only the characters that they're facing and the monsters that they're facing, but the characters themselves fighting with these +1 weapons and swords, and it's just so much fun. And then the characters, they are complex, they are many, but they are a lot of fun, and they each have their motives. They're not just cookie cutter, man, they really aren't. And they're real and raw enough to feel real and raw, but they are still very fantasaical and a lot of fun and interesting to read, especially the relationship between that band of brothers. Some people might be turned off by this because they're like, I don't want to read a fantasy story about more dudes, doing dude things together. This isn't that. This is a story of brothers coming back together again, uniting together, and their friendship that develops, and that bond that is unbreakable even through time and trial, and it's so good. So that relationship between the bandmates are wonderful. The villain is so interesting and unique as well, and then they get a few like party members that come along every once in a while. Most of those are somewhat unique, some are forgettable, but Larkspur is one of my most interested characters, because the way that she starts and the way that she concludes are two totally different characters, but the same person, and it's so interesting and so unique. I love her story and where she ended up. I would have read a whole book just about her. So that is all that I have to say about her, about the characters, about the action sequences. Now, to be critical, there's really only one thing, and it's the info dumps. As you would imagine in a D&D world, with the dungeon master sitting at the table kind of describing the new scenery that you're looking at, sometimes that can get humdrum, long, and monotonous, and you get that here. You might not notice it after the first little bit, and he does it well, but he does it often. I noticed it all the way throughout, and it wasn't game-breaking or immersion-breaking, and the way that he's building out the scenes are wonderful, but it does slow things down a little bit, and they're heavy, they're condensed, but again, he is really building out the world as though he's the dungeon master and we're sitting amongst the table. But that's really the only negative thing that I've got to say here. In summary, man, this is a new kind of fantasy. A fantasy that has enough humor, but doesn't go all the way into humor. A fantasy that is very like accessible for new fantasy readers, and that tells a unique story. We don't have any orphans here. Like, no one's an orphan. We've got grown men that are not in their prime fighting together, battling together, and that's just wonderful. No one else is doing anything like this. I gave it a full 5 out of 5 stars, and I've heard the sequel is even better. I believe it's going to be a trilogy. Right now there's only 2 out. It is this book, and it is Bloody Rose, which is a continuing story of a different band, a different mercenary band, one of them being the daughter of one of these 5 from this first series. So super interested in getting into that new series. If you haven't yet, check out Nicholas Eames. Check out this book, Kings of the Wyld, because it is absolutely wonderful. Does this not sound like the most insane book that you've ever read? Like, is there more insane that works? Have you read any other fantasy or sci-fi books that are more insane than this premise, but that works? Please let me know down below, because I'm ready to read more. Like, now my eyes have been opened that there's more than just the traditional sci-fi fantasy that I'm used to. So please let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, for clicking like. If you haven't yet, click subscribe, join the Dragon Army, and we'll see you in the next video.